In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Emmeringen Foundation, Arcus Foundation, the estate of Richard W. Weiland, Dewey and LaBeouf, and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.
With the upcoming 2012 elections, much is at stake in the fight for LGBT equality. In battleground states across the country, LGBT activists are trying to protect themselves against discrimination and defend the rights they've already won. Tonight on In the Life, we revisit our story on Iowa, where activists are fighting against a campaign to repeal marriage equality.
Our hope is that we've now had same-sex marriage in Iowa long enough that people have realized, the sky isn't falling.
And in Ohio, an update on how, after years of trying, LGBT people are still seeking housing and employment protections.
The discrimination that's going on in the state of Ohio is so basic that people are living in poverty.
We brought everybody together.
Act up!
And we're married.
There was nothing for him to hide.
Make a promise.
In December 2005, Lambda Legal filed a marriage lawsuit in Polk County, Iowa on behalf of 6 same-sex couples who wanted to marry. The lawsuit, known as Varnum versus Breen, argued that under the equal protection and due process guarantees of the Iowa Constitution, it is unlawful to bar same-sex couples from marrying.
The ruling came out in late August 2007. The case was then appealed by the defendants to the Iowa Supreme Court.
Of course, we had been sequestered that morning, and we did not know the results.
Our adrenaline went absolutely through the roof. Okay, this is it.
You've been through so much, and it's such an emotional issue. I mean, it's your life.
We won. Not only that, it is unanimous. The Iowa Supreme Court affirmed the lower court ruling ordering the issuance of marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Iowa has a history of being a state that's among first. Iowa was one of the very first states that actually dealt with slavery before the Dred Scott decision. And we also allowed school children to attend schools together. Iowa was one of the first to admit women to the bar. So it seems reasonable that Iowa should have taken a position on marriage.
What we have found in Iowa is people take you as a person first.
Very fun toy.
As long as you're not harming anybody and you're doing good things with your life, you tend to be supported. That's one of the reasons that we felt like the case was going to be successful, is because people here realize, well, you know what, those are my neighbors, or those are my friends, or my kids play with their kids, and they're good people.
I don't think it was ever a mystery to anybody here in our small community that we were a gay couple. There's these 2 guys that come in and open a restaurant out of all businesses. They live together, they do everything together. But there's this interesting things in Iowa that people sort of don't meddle into your business. I truly think that it's a live and let live state.
Growing up, by the time I was in junior high, I knew I was different, this type of thing, and, maybe the word gay hadn't come to mind, but my parents had had such a wonderful marriage, but, I always felt I will never have something like that. I just, it never entered my mind that I could have that. And, when all this started, and, now I have what they had, and that's such a good feeling.
One Iowa is the state's largest lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender advocacy organization, committed to full equality for LGBT individuals.
One Iowa has been focused on preserving the freedom to marry for Iowans.
and that has been our focus from a public education standpoint. There's a lot of conversations that have to happen with Iowans right now. But here's the thing, we are up against the biggest challenge of this organization's history, period, and this election is huge.
Stakes were high during the 2010 midterm elections. Control of the Iowa House, the Senate, as well as the governorship were up for grabs. And 3 of the 7 Supreme Court justices who unanimously ruled in favor of same-sex marriage were also on the ballot for retention.
We are going to take all of our effort, all of our energy, all of our resources, all of our network, and we're going to become crystal clear in our focus on unseating 3 justices on the November 2 ballot.
Bob Vanderplaat's campaign against the justices, Iowa for Freedom, was historic. For the first time, it politicized the retention process.
It was the perfect storm. Bob talked the talk about the justices. He painted a picture that stuck with the Iowans that wanted to vote no because they were upset about one thing or the other. We were given the intellectual arguments where Bob was just given the sound bites that stuck with the TV and radio.
Liberal, out-of-control judges ignoring our tradition.
They say that I and the Supreme Court of Iowa exceeded our judicial authority because of those people's disagreement with one decision, the Varnum versus Breen decision. They say that that is a basis for not retaining us as judges. The reason I say that that is, at best, a misuse of the retention process, and at worst, an abuse of the retention process, is because that the retention process was never meant to be a referendum on particular decisions. It was intended to be an assessment of any particular judge's fitness to hold the position that he or she occupied.
Justices need to make decisions based on the merits of a case. The case is presented to them, the facts are presented to the justices, and they hear out the facts. And then the justices are charged with the duty of applying the law and applying the Iowa Constitution to the facts of a case, and from that they make a decision. They're not influenced by money, they're not influenced by power.
And that's pretty much where our coverage really kicked off for the next couple months, is trying to find out where the money's coming from, what it's going to, and who these people are. Now, by the time it was they were kicking off their Judge Bush tour of the state, there was a half dozen to a handful of national anti-gay organizations that were spending big money in Iowa.
The money that is funding Mr. Vanderplaat's campaign is largely out-of-state money contributed by special interests. How much money are you getting from this marriage organization that's headquartered in Mississippi, as I understand it?
I think the National Organization of Marriage is actually headquartered out of Michigan.
How much money are you getting from those groups?
I think if you take a look at our independent expenditure reports, because we do follow the letter of the law, you'll find out exactly what we're spending.
Tell us. Just tell us. How much are you getting from those groups?
You know, I'm the state spokesperson and chair of this deal, but as far as the money, what we have done, and I think what
is it $50 million? Is it $100 million?
In the midterm elections, Democrats lost control of the House and the governorship, but held on to a slight majority in the Senate. District Judge Hansen was retained, but all 3 Supreme Court justices were unseated.
The day after the election was a tough day. At the end of the day, we woke up and we realized, yeah, we had a tough election night. We lost a lot of pro-equality legislators. We lost the 3 justices. But we still realized we had marriage equality here in the state of Iowa.
Bob essentially, in my opinion, took the retention vote and turned it into a retaliation vote. We've lost 3 excellent judicial servants, Justices Strite and Baker and Turnus. So Bob did a real disservice, I think, to the people of Iowa and did a great disservice to our judicial branch.
Nobody really took Bob Vander Plaats all that seriously. He had never won a campaign before, so that was part of the reason I think that a lot of people dismissed it. Part of the reason a lot of the media dismissed it was because they didn't think they had to take him seriously. But this was a guy that had the money to do it, had the organization to do it, and he was taken for granted that he was not going to be successful in this. It really emboldened the social conservatives and the right. From the very beginning, these groups said, this is step one. Like, we are going to start here, and this is going to send a message to judges all over the country.
Iowa is in need of bold leadership today.
Since the Supreme Court ruling came down in 2009, same-sex marriage opponents have been trying to get a marriage amendment through the Iowa legislature. An amendment to the Constitution is the only way to change marriage in Iowa. The bill would have to pass through 2 consecutive sessions of the legislature. Then it could go on the ballot for a vote of the people.
I see a bunch of people that merely want to profess their love for each other and want state law to recognize that. Is that so wrong?
What I've talked to people about is give me stories about what their life is like. I don't want it to be about me and what I believe. I want it to be about real human beings out there and how their life is different because we have marriage equality.
You know, it's funny. You wouldn't think that the institution of marriage would make that much of a difference in the day-to-day life. I mean, we have been together since the beginning, and our relationship clicked very quickly. Marriage allows you to say to people, this is my husband, and people know automatically what that means. It's not, this is my partner. I mean, that was always a problem here, especially since we are in a business together, and because of that, you don't get quite the same respect or recognition of your relationship that it deserves. And whereas marriage clears that up. There is no ambiguity in marriage.
It's a human right issue. It's not about religion. We're not talking about religious marriage. I don't want to force anybody to take me into their church. I don't want to go to anybody's church. I respect sort of people's traditions. I always say that I didn't come here to change anybody's mind on anything. I came here to live my life. I came here in the pursuit of happiness, like Jefferson so eloquently said, and I wish that would be across the board for all of us.
On January 19, 2011, a joint resolution, the first step toward amending Iowa's Constitution, was introduced in the House. On January 24th, a subcommittee meeting was held at the Capitol. Advocates on both sides of the issue were out in full force.
This is about House Joint Resolution 6. The marriage will be between one man and one woman, and it shall be the only legal union valid and recognized in this state.
I am here today because I didn't vote on your marriage, so why should you vote on mine?
I'm here today because I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman because I am a Christian.
We just want to stay married. We want to keep our rights.
I believe that everyone deserves the right to vote.
The resolution passed the subcommittee. On January 31st, the Iowa House held a public hearing. A young man named Zach Walls stood up and testified against the resolution.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Zach Walls. I'm a 6th-generation Iowan and an engineering student at the University of Iowa, and I was raised by 2 women. Our family really isn't so different from any other Iowa family. You know, when I'm home, we go to church together, we eat dinner, we go on vacations. The question always comes down to, well, can gays even raise kids? And the question, the conversation gets quiet for a moment because most people don't really have an answer. And then I raise my hand and say, actually, I was raised by a gay couple, and I'm doing pretty well. Over the next 2 hours, I'm sure we're going to hear plenty of testimony about how damaging having gay parents is on kids. But in my 19 years, not once have I ever been confronted by an individual who realized independently that I was raised by a gay couple. And you know why? Because the sexual orientation of my parents has had 0 effect on the content of my character. Thank you very much.
Despite overwhelming testimony against the resolution, it passed the House a day later on February 1st.
I think a lot of Iowans are being played. You know, at that hearing, none of the opponents were talking about really what, you know, same-sex marriage was doing to the state. They weren't talking about how the sky was falling or anything. They were very smart in how they addressed it, and they you know, tried to wrap themselves in this banner of democracy and let the people vote, and that was like the refrain all night. But at the end of the day, they've kind of missed the point. You can't put these kinds of rights to a vote. So if you were really going to try and pass this constitutional amendment and really let the people vote, they wouldn't just be voting on same-sex marriage, they'd be voting fundamentally on the notion that we have as Americans of equal protection altogether.
The only thing protecting against a vote on a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage is the Democratic-controlled Iowa Senate, led by Senate Majority Leader Mike Gronstal.
I think there's a fair-minded majority in the Iowa Senate. I don't think people believe it's appropriate to put discrimination into the state constitution. I believe what we're doing will be positively received by Iowans. So it's not going to come up for debate in the Senate as long as I'm the leader.
The big fight on the horizon is going to be in 2012 when Senate Majority Leader Mike Gronstal, he's up for re-election. I think that's going to be where the next big round of spending is going to be. I think that's going to be where the next big fight is going to be. Is they think if they can knock him off, then no one's going to stand in the way of this amendment getting through the Senate.
Our hope is that we've now had same-sex marriage in Iowa long enough that people have realized, you know, the sky isn't falling. You know, gay isn't catching, you know. People aren't feeling that, you know, Steve and Bob's marriage down the street is affecting their own. And so we feel very good about the state of the race, but at the same time, there's a lot of pressure from outside groups, and so we've got a lot of work to do.
Our state is pretty difficult sometimes. I think the hardest part is navigating life just in general.
I think it's important that people know that I'm gay and that I have children and that I have a life and a job that needs to be protected.
This is where I am and this is how I feel and this is the way I like to be.
I have a 5-year-old son. He's very proud of me. Make sure no matter where we go, that everybody knows that I'm his dad.
Ohio is home to 11 million people. Like other Americans, Ohioans are struggling to work, live, and find the American dream.
Our nation must defend the sanctity of marriage.
In 2004, Ohio voters passed a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage.
5 years ago, Ohio was listed 51st out of the states, including DC in the mix, the worst state for LGBT rights. Transgender people don't have the right to change their birth certificate. There's been battles over domestic partner registries. There was a piece of legislation introduced 5 years ago to ban adoption. We're starting at the very basic kind of stuff. You know, the discussion around gay marriage is sort of like, we'll talk about that once we have the right to work and once we have the right to live.
You know, I've asked people that are common sense, sort of normal folks, do you think it's right to fire somebody solely on the basis of being gay or lesbian or transgendered? And most, you know, decent people say, of course not. But they have no idea that in Ohio it's actually legal and you can get away with firing somebody solely on that basis.
Equality Ohio, we refer to it as the phoenix rising out of the ashes of our marriage vote in 2004. There was a group of activists from across the state that came together and said, what are we doing in Ohio? What should we be doing in Ohio?
It's a brand new organization, really, trying to organize an entire state and build relationships with legislators to begin that education about why is this important, how does this affect people, how does this make Ohio look to the rest of the country and the rest of the world?
I was a corporate trainer for 9 years, and then I managed some large portrait studios. I thought it would be easier to get a job. I have lots of experience in totally different fields. I have management, behind me and things of that sort. And as soon as I started transitioning, I can't find anything.
Ohio is only one of 3 states that will not correct a birth certificate for transgender individuals, which makes it very difficult for people when it comes to employment, because they're supposed to show all this identification, and if their identification, say their driver's license says male, and their birth certificate says female, there's incongruency.
My last job, I lost because of some complications with restroom usage. Now, normally in public, I'll just go into the men's restroom and have no problem. But unfortunately, when you get hired, at least in my state, you have to supply a birth certificate, which is not amended. So it does state female. So then they start delegating where you can and cannot go to the bathroom. They had made one in the basement of a building available for me. Unfortunately, it was inoperable, so I left the workplace to use the restroom off base or what have you, and when I came back, I had clocked in too late, so I got fired. And this is after they warned me not to use the men's bathroom.
The discrimination that's going on in the state of Ohio against LGBT people and the lack of protection is so basic that people are living in poverty because of the discrimination, which I don't think most people have thought about. Most elected officials don't really think about until you bring it to their awareness.
Bills for third consideration.
In response to the lack of protections, legislation was introduced in the Ohio State House in 2009.
We're talking about House Bill 176, which is the Gay Lesbian Non-Discrimination Act, and this bill covers employment, credit, and housing.
Businesses know that discrimination is bad for business.
We've tried to make the argument that why would you want to discriminate against anyone? Ohio, like many states, are having some tough economic times, and it also ranks #1 in the country of 18 to 40-year-olds leaving their state. So why would you want to put up "you're not welcome here" kind of sign to anyone?
But conservatives have opposed the bill on moral grounds.
When you get down to the root of House Bill 176, it is about forcing acceptance of a lifestyle that many people disagree with.
And shame on you for thinking you know better than other people in this state what their moral values should be.
What really helped was having folks come before the legislature, even before we were allowed to have hearings this last session. There were lobby days that were organized by the advocates in the LGBT community, and to have people come in and talk to legislators to tell their individual stories. I think one of the best examples of that was Jimmy Beal.
I taught high school. I taught government and law and psych and, classes that really prepared kids for the rigors that were associated with college. I had, in fact, just had my final evaluation, and I had just been offered a 3-year contract. 2 days later, was called in to the principal's office and told that despite just being offered a contract, I would be non-renewed for the next school year. I would be fired. And I can tell you today that I remember exactly how that felt then. I was absolutely stunned.
She was fired just because there was a suspicion that she was a lesbian. And this was a woman who was highly regarded by her peers, by her students. And I knew that actually more and more personally because I was a Facebook friend of hers eventually, and I saw the comments from the students who she had had in the past who were now in college, who were writing things about how proud they were of her and what she had done and what she stood for. So those stories started to really make a difference, I think, in legislators' minds, and they got it.
I rise today in support of House Bill 176.
We should stop discriminating. We should support this bill.
And I know that there are many people who may be disappointed by my support for this legislation.
And I come at this
not as a Republican. I come at it as an Ohioan, and really more than that, just as a plain human being.
The House passed HB 176 by a vote of 56 to 39.
The bill is hereby passed.
But the bill never made it to a vote in the Ohio Senate. Late in 2011, the bill was reintroduced as House Bill 335. The bill faces an uphill battle with the Republican-controlled House and Senate.
It's not going to be easy. It's going to take Ohioans really kind of saying, we're going to do the letter writing, we're going to do the contacting, we're going to, get businesses talking to the senators, that we're going to actually do this kind of grassroots work that really needs to be done.
We have to get more people out there to talk to their senators. It's the meeting the person that really makes the difference in whether bills get passed or not.
Are you ready to move to Canada? Why are we still here? When are we moving to Canada?
I mean, the kids have their roots here, their friends are here, their school's here, and they don't want to leave, and they shouldn't have to.
So instead of leaving, we become part of the solution.
Ohio is our home.
I love Ohio and I really love Cleveland.
We believe that we will make this change.
We're just like everybody else with regard to employment, public accommodation, housing. We need the same securities as everybody else does.
I want to be there when the whole state flips. When we see all of our rights, I want to be a part of that. I want to see that happen.
Thank you for watching In the Life. To watch more In the States coverage, visit our website at itlmedia.org.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Emmeringen Foundation, Arcus Foundation, the estate of Richard W. Weiland, Dewey and LaBeouf, and by the annual support of In the Life members like you.